Often we limit ourselves for what we think is possible in terms of relationship, especially when we're pursuing really big goals. I think there's a level of embarrassment that sometimes happens, especially with women, but also with men, about saying, I want a relationship. So people try to play it cool and say, oh, if it happens, it happens. No, if you want it, go for it. You don't say if it happens about your business goals. Don't do that about your relationship. That's absurd.
Tim Wolf here. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like you have to choose between success and love? Like building your career means sacrificing deep, meaningful relationships, or that building great relationships means sacrificing your career? If so, today's episode is just for you. I'm sitting down with Melissa Nanavati, a high-performance relationship expert who helps ambitious individuals, really ambitious couples, build conflict-free, deeply connected relationships while still pursuing their biggest goals. And Melissa isn't just talking theory. She's lived it. She graduated college at 19, became an international speaker by 25. She created multiple best-selling textbook. And so we're going to break down why traditional dating advice often fails high performers, how you can build a relationship that really fuels your ambition rather than compete with it, and while fighting isn't inevitable, and how Melissa and Akshay created a framework to avoid it entirely. This is really the secret to keeping the honeymoon phase alive forever. All right, let's get into this episode. Welcome to Lumina Vanguard. I'm really excited to have this special episode, and my friend Melissa Nanavati. I am just fascinated with what you are doing right now, and as a very close friend, and we met through your husband, Akshay Nanavati, and it's really been quite an amazing journey that I've seen you guys go on together, and I'm definitely looking forward to talking more about you and your relationship and what you're doing right now. Melissa is a master at high performance relationships and teaching people how to pursue really great relationships while having a high performance career. And I think this topic is so impactful for the people who are really leading the charge as luminaries out there in the world, trying to create a change in the world. You know, I know for myself, like, I have a big mission on this planet, and yet I also want to be a husband, a father, and build an incredible relationship as well. We want it all, right? A good relationship, a good business or career. And I think that creates such a interesting challenge. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to have you here to talk about that. And I'm going to let you talk more about yourself, but tell us a little bit about what you do and how you kind of got here, and what's your mission on this?
First of all, I'm honored to be here and to be able to have this conversation with you and to share with your audience here, because I think that, so often we limit ourselves for what we think is possible in terms of relationship, especially when we're pursuing really big goals, right? So my mission is really to help high performers create a conflict-free, permanent honeymoon state with their partner while pursuing epic goals. So really to unlock that same level of mastery that you're seeking in your professional life, in your relationships, because I think that, both can coexist and one actually feeds the other. So for me, really how I got here, so I experienced the highs and lows, I would say, of dating and pursuing love as a high performer. I graduated from college actually at 19. I was a published author before age 21. I was teaching courses. I was, publishing books, and I could not find a relationship to save my life. I went on over 100 first dates. I worked with matchmakers. I was on every dating app imaginable. And I was even being set up by friends. And it wasn't until I really started to examine the advice that I was taking in, that I was trying to apply, and really seeing how the common advice when it comes to dating and relationships doesn't exactly apply to high performers. Because when you're pursuing this high level of mastery in whatever your craft is, you do have a different way of navigating life. And so that means that you have to change your approach to relationships. So it wasn't really until I broke away from what I would say is kind of the normal way of going about dating and relationships that I was able to find, meet, and marry my now husband, Akshay Nanavati, and really create this thriving relationship while we were both pursuing epic goals, really working hard in the day to day, but then also having this relationship be this soft place to land at the end of each day. So now how I'm really helping high performers is, through a lot of the content that I'm creating on Instagram, the workbooks, the guides, and I'm actually working on a book at the same time to be able to really help high performers and create more of a blueprint for how to approach relationships. So, I wouldn't call myself a relationship coach. I would actually call myself a relationship architect, because for me, it's all about giving this blueprint, this design, and breaking down relationship mastery into a set of skills and behaviors that any high performer can apply.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I know Akshay, just a little background for the listener. Him and I, we were not together, but I guess adjacent. We did a darkness retreat together back in, I think it was 2021. And now he's a big adventurer around the world, was a Marine veteran, and is currently in Antarctica, pulling a sled across the entirety of Antarctica. And so talk about a little bit about for you in that relationship. You're a high performer. You've worked with Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies, I think you said. And in the social media space, in the marketing space, and him being a polar explorer and going on various expeditions all the time. So in order to kind of set the framework for how this came about for you, tell us a little bit about what happened in that relationship. What did you discover as like kind of the seeds in that relationship that led you to move into what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So for me, I had started working through systematically all the things that I thought were really kind of holding me back before actually even meeting Akshay. I was doing neurofeedback. I was really working through old tendencies around people pleasing, anxiety. And so now to be in a place where I am married to somebody who is actually going to be gone for a total of 6 months in the first year of our marriage was a big transition, but also such an opportunity to really show me that I had worked through a lot of these things that I had been working on growing through. So our relationship initially started, I actually moved from my home of 12 years in Portland, Oregon, after I'd gone to, similarly, a retreat, meditation, neurofeedback, where I had what I would call a vision of my future. And, it wasn't specifics of what the person looked like or anything like that, but I knew it was someplace warm, and I knew that we had a beautiful relationship where we were challenging each other to grow. And so I actually broke my lease, moved on intuition, didn't know anyone in Arizona, but I knew that's where I had to be. I ended up moving exactly 8 minutes away from where Akshay lived at the time and had started going to different events every week to try and meet somebody. And I was very direct about that. And so one of Akshay's friends ultimately introduced us because I said, I'm here looking to meet someone. I don't need, business support. I'm looking to meet someone. And so we went, kind of on our first couple of dates. At the time, Akshay was scheduled to go to Antarctica for 4 months, only a few months later. Luckily, that got postponed. But so from the very beginning, we both had to approach the relationship differently. We had to lay all of our cards on the table, talk about our goals, our values, what we were looking for. So we basically decided to be together for the next 7 months on our second date, because he said, if I'm going to be with someone, if I'm going to start dating, go down this road, I can't have them break up with me while I'm in Antarctica. So really the invitation for both of us was to be more vulnerable, be more honest, be more direct, and have more clarity about exactly what we wanted than we ever had before. And that was sort of what laid the seeds, as you put it, to me thinking about, okay, there's something different we did here that was really successful. What was it? And so really taking the lessons learned from how we approached not only early dating, but we made a commitment very early on to never fight, and to not do that by avoiding the big topics, but to put everything on the table. And we really created our own framework and approach to how to navigate disagreements, because disagreements are inevitable, but fighting is not. And we wanted a higher standard for our relationship. And now, having actually implemented that, the goal was, how do we bring this to other people? Because we have something here that is really special and unique in our ability to both feel supported, seen, felt, heard, while doing some pretty extreme things.
Yes. What would you say are some of the top couple of points or things that someone could implement in their relationship especially if they're both high performers, and something that might be different from a conventional relationship?
I think the biggest thing is making a commitment to address issues before they become a fight. I think that is the number one thing. If you can make that verbal commitment, it has to be both of you. It can't just be one of you saying, I promise to bring up all the issues, because so much of conflict originates from letting things fester, especially the things that matter. And I think that, high performers are capable of this and are capable of more because they do this in their work life, right? So you don't let an issue with, like, say, your marketing funnel spiral out of control before you deal with it, right? So that's applying some of the same things that you do in your work life to your relationship and having that open dialogue of saying, listen, I want to be with you forever. I want to make this work. I want us to both be thriving. And to do that, we can't expect mind reading. So really that commitment to bringing up issues before they become a point of friction, I think is one of the number one things. I think the other thing is really systematizing, making the other person feel loved. I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of 5 core love languages.
Yeah. Mine are acts of service and physical touch.
Beautiful. And so you already know those. And so for anybody who might be listening who does not know what they are, just as you mentioned, acts of service, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, and gifts. So all of those, whether or not you like all of them or prioritize a couple of them, if there's ways you can touch on every one of those each day with your partner, you set yourself up for a lot of success, right? So if there's ways to just practice expressing gratitude each morning, giving someone a hug or a kiss before you leave, being intentional about being off your phone when you're together, really being present and having that quality time, maybe picking up some flowers on your way home from work. But how can you touch on all those little ways of feeling and making someone feel loved every single day? And I think that those are the 2 core things. Like when it really comes down to what you can do different in your relationship, it's that commitment to not letting things fester and making sure that both parties feel truly loved and appreciated every single day.
Yeah, that's okay. I think I don't know the exact specifics. Don't quote me on this, but I think I read that if a husband and wife or people in a relationship kiss before they leave, there's like a 30% longer life expectancy, I think.
Yeah.
Which is quite a big number, I would say. Yeah. That's so cool.
And I think I was just going to say the other thing too that I think we often forget about, because there was actually a study done, and I wish I could recall it at this moment in time, but the 2 kind of core reasons that people cheat in relationships are due to not feeling desired or appreciated. And the other is novelty. So the other thing I would mention is making it a regular practice to have new experiences either with your partner or spending time away from your partner so that it's novel when you are together. So that doesn't mean your partner has to go to Antarctica for 4 months, but even little ways, right? So maybe running errands when the other person's at home, to giving them a little bit of alone time and that space, because that creates novelty. So having those new experiences and then making the other person feel desired, that I think significantly improves your chances of longevity in your relationship and just general happiness.
Yeah, I love that. When you're in a relationship with a high performer and being a high performer yourself, what would you say is the best way to either figure out or decide how you support each other in your individual missions? So like, if I'm in a relationship with another woman, how do I best support her in her mission, even though she's a high performer, vice versa with me?
It's a great question. And I think the biggest thing is having really honest, vulnerable conversations about what is the biggest needle mover for each of you in terms of feeling loved and supported. So it's going to be different for every person. But for example, one of the big things for me is gifts, actually, especially right now with Akshay being so focused and my goal really being to support him by taking everything off his plate in terms of the day-to-day life things. Just him bringing me roses once a week, huge needle mover. And so figuring out, all right, what is that one thing that makes me feel extra giddy, excited, loved by my partner? for Akshay, it is when I cook him food. Him having a really good meal at the end of the day makes him feel nourished in a very special way. So again, kind of coming back to those love languages, but really identifying, all right, every relationship I always talk about is going through seasons. So there's inevitably going to be a season where one of you just has more that you're focused on as a high performer. So leading up to this expedition, it was Akshay that had more on his plate, realistically, even though I'm doing a lot. So I see this as a season where I'm going to take more of the burden, take more of the day-to-day load, because that's what makes sense. But we couldn't do that without having an honest conversation. And we said this is going to be the case for maybe the first 6 months to a year of our marriage. But then after that, we're going to look at how he can more support in the day-to-day, right? So really understanding, especially if you're in a long-term relationship, who is the season need to be focused on in terms of support versus striving. And not to say you both can't strive at the same time, but there's going to be a give and take. So having that dialogue, and then also looking at the calendar and making everything a system. I love this when it comes to relationships. A lot of high performers are great at this in their day-to-day life, but saying, all right, for this month, I just need to focus on this. Can you handle all the dishes, right? So seemingly small things, but can really reduce the friction. And so that starts with clarity within. So asking yourself, what do I need the most? And then having the honest conversation, asking the other person, is this something you can offer to me right now?
That's good. I'm curious, how did this conversation around really like focusing in on the relationship, really building that? I know you said just knowing the fact that it was going to be 7 months and then you wouldn't see him for a while, right? So that really accelerated the timeline. But what really drove, beyond that, what really drove how you guys responded to this and the choices you made in creating those systems, and what in that was kind of like the most surprising to you as a result?
So what really drove this for both of us is that, I'm in my 30s, he was approaching 40, and we knew that we wanted this to be our last and best relationship. So I think we were both at a space, he had previously been married. I had been through the ringer with dating and been in several long-term relationships as well. And so I think it was that inner knowing of, I want to do, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to invest time, especially with how busy my schedule it is, everything that I'm focused on. I want to lay a perfect foundation. And while I don't necessarily always believe in using that term, we really did that. And, we've actually had several marriage and family therapists that are friends comment and say, what's unique about what you did is that you laid a foundation that doesn't allow cracks to form in the first place. By talking about all of the big topics very early on. Of course, that was expedited by the fact that he was about to be gone. But even if he hadn't been, we talked about it and we thought, we really would have addressed these things early because we both had a lot of clarity. Before we ever met, we actually both made lists of all the qualities we wanted in our partner. And we were actually 100% of each other's lists.
Wow.
Which is pretty wild. Yeah. And, we didn't list things that were superficial characteristics, nothing around, the way the other person should look, things that are out of one's control. But what we really focused in on was two things. So first was values. So both of us are family oriented. We value integrity, all of those sort of pieces. And then the other is lifestyle. So he always says that shit talking is his love language. Similarly, I've said banter is my love language. And so knowing that I wanted to find somebody who could be really playful with me and we could have that sense of humor during the day. So finding values alignment and lifestyle alignment was really the key for us to be able to lay such a strong foundation. And then in terms of things that were surprising, do you mean in terms of the things that we uncovered through these conversations, or could you add a little bit more color to that question?
Yeah. So I'm curious about as you put together and built your relationship and really these tools, more focusing on the tools that you've built. Was there anything that maybe didn't work the way you expected it to, or worked so incredibly well, far more than you expected it to? That's kind of where I was going.
That makes sense. For me, the thing that I thought was most surprising was something that we didn't actually discuss until after we both did it. So one of the frameworks was whenever something would come up, right? Some point of friction, whether it was around fundraising, because for this expedition, we had to raise $1.1 million, which you can imagine would put a little strain on a relationship, but we didn't have any fights or anything that even remotely was similar to that, because every time something comes up, something that we both did that we didn't realize until afterwards was we would immediately take ownership and assume responsibility. We would say, that was on me, that was my fault. And so it was almost this competition of who would take ownership first, but in a really sweet way. And so what we discovered, and what was surprising about that, is that really softened the experience of having moments of misunderstanding. When both of us could come at it and say, I'm sorry for the role I took in that misunderstanding, or I'm sorry I didn't understand the way that you maybe said that. And I feel like there's been some things floating around social media around not apologizing or not saying sorry, but I think that it's so valuable and important, especially in a relationship when miscommunications happen. And so that was something that we now built into what I like to call our conflict-free communication framework, which is really always assuming positive intent, not expecting mind reading, taking ownership of your part in every misunderstanding, and always approaching things as a team. And this is something we found that worked uniquely well. It was never you versus me or him versus I. It's always him and I versus the issue. And so externalizing any issues as something separate from the other person, even if it's a behavior that the other person is doing that you don't particularly like, right, is making it external and saying, how do we come to resolution about this issue or about this behavior, about this thing? And that was particularly surprising, was that we just both took ownership right away. And so I know that that doesn't necessarily come naturally to everyone, but it was something we had both found was really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, and it's definitely, a potentially controversial thing in some circles, but I do think that taking, at least take ownership of the part you had control over at minimum, and even if you didn't have control over something, you're the only one who can do anything to change it. So ultimately, that radical, responsibility and transparency that you're talking about, honesty, I mean, all those things, I think that's so important for that conflict thing. That makes so much sense to me. So
Appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm always happy to hear that too. And with that too, the other phrase that we actually use a lot in moments of what I like to call disagreements or friction is saying, my lens of reality is. Because what that immediately allows you to do is to recognize that your view is clouded through a lens and that there are multiple ways to view the situation. Because I think where people get really stuck, especially in points of conflict, is saying, the way that I'm seeing this is 100% correct, right? And that's the only way that this can be seen. But when we really look at things, there's so much nuance. There was one discussion that we were having about the fundraising and about whether or not to accept support from family that was a moment of discomfort for both of us. And then we were both able to say, my view is, and then we realized we were actually even saying the same thing, but we were saying it in a way that the other person wasn't understanding. And so when we were able to talk about our lens of reality or our lens on this conversation, it immediately both allowed us to step back and really see what the other person was saying, and then practice repeating back what you just heard them say, at which point we actually realized we agreed, which are pretty funny moments. So, having that moment though to say, like, my lens is and what I'm hearing you say is, are two of the most powerful phrases in those moments that can really allow for more understanding.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think as you're going through the process of figuring out how to even live in relationship with someone else and all the quote unquote baggage, I guess, that you bring to the table, always kind of diving in and figuring out how to work with someone in that way, you have to open up, you have to see, you have to at least take a pause and say, they are going to see things differently than me. And no matter what's happened, my past, my lens is always going to be on it.
I know ourselves. That's the biggest thing.
Probably would be very boring.
Absolutely. And I even hear from some friends who are first time living with their partners, getting frustrated about how they do the dishes or their cleaning habits. And it's funny because Akshay and I are pretty much opposite on just about everything in the day to day, but being able to bring some play and humor to that and remember that you are not living with yourself, I think is very important, especially for high performers, because we tend to be a little bit control freaks, a little bit particular about the way things are done. And so just remembering that you aren't dating yourself, I think is really, really helpful. And be boring, but that doesn't add any opportunities for growth.
Yeah, for sure. Right, relationships are such a transformative place. And I think especially for those of us who are really trying to build and create and do something new, transformation is always a very big part of our lives. I am curious a little bit about, and I don't necessarily think, this is your experience, but I'm curious what you would think about this. You talked about kind of finding your forever person with Akshay, and that wanting to be the last person that you married. And I'm curious, like in today's society, I think we see a lot of people who will talk about evolving apart or moving in different directions, or as a high performer or a conscious leader, sometimes, you're increasing your level of consciousness and going to a different level and, dealing with now, all the angles and differences that you might see in something like that. So obviously this is a hotbed of place that conflicts can arise. So I'm curious, what do you think about that idea that you could evolve past someone or quicker than someone, and how do you deal with that in a relationship?
I think that's a great question. And I think that the reality is you're never going to grow and evolve at the exact same pace as anyone, your partner, whoever that may be. So I think of it as an invitation for you to either you feel like you're evolving quicker, to role model in that arena or in the way that you are evolving for your partner. And it's up to the other person to want to either meet you there or match you there or to evolve in different ways. I don't think that I believe if you make the commitment that this is the person that you're going to be with forever and you are both high performers, meaning, I really define high performer as somebody who has ambition, a commitment to growth, focus, discipline, and intentional living. And if you have all those qualities and you are a high performer and you are married or planning to marry another high performer, I think that both parties are always looking to grow. So it's okay if you grow at different paces, but not holding resentment or holding your partner to the same standard of saying you have to grow and evolve the exact same way I am at all times, but really being able to share in that process. I think if two people are really committed to being together and making that their forever partnership, that they can. But in that commitment, also sharing the revelations that you're having as you're growing and evolving these new ways. So maybe you are having net new experiences, which you should be, than your partner, but are you sharing it with them? Are you inviting conversation? Are you taking intentional time to connect with them and share your thoughts, your feelings about these new moments of growth, this new evolution that you're experiencing? So I think it just comes down to a level of, are you committed to the partnership? And is the other person a true high performer in that they are commitment to their own growth? So it doesn't have to be growth at the same time, but I think, if you have alignment in that commitment to growth and you are a high performer, you can make it work.
Awesome. I love that. What would you say would be your biggest piece of advice? I know you said that you kind of followed your intuition, dropped everything, went to Arizona. What would you say is your biggest piece of advice for an ambitious or high performance person who's looking to find another high performance partner?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is getting really clarity about what you're looking for. So creating that list that I mentioned earlier around values and lifestyle things that you're looking for, because it will allow you to be discerning when you are going on dates, when you are meeting people. But if you don't have a crystal clear vision of exactly what it is that you're looking for, it's hard to know if you've found it. And then I think beyond that too is trying a lot of different methods, right? So not everybody has to break their lease and move to meet a partner, but I think that there is value in getting yourself in new circles consistently. So operationalize it. And that's what I did. I made a commitment to go to a new event every single week and connect with people when you're at those events that aren't just people you're attracted to. I think that's the big mistake people make. They're saying, oh, I'm trying all these new things. I'm trying this new hobby. I'm going to a dance class, but I didn't see anybody I was attracted to, right? So I think that that's a big mistake, because ultimately what allowed me to meet Akshay was the fact that I talked to the person putting on the workshop, who was in a committed partnership, but I thought this is a high value person that's going to surround himself with other high value people. And I was right. And so talking to people that aren't maybe who you are looking to date, but making those connections and then being really honest about the fact that you want partnership. I think there's a level of embarrassment that sometimes happens, especially with women, but also with men, about saying, I want a relationship. So people try to play it cool and say, oh, if it happens, it happens. No, if you want it, go for it. You don't say if it happens about your business goals. Don't do that about your relationship. That's absurd. And so I think it's that commitment, operationalize it because you're busy. So say, all right, I'm going to do a new event, or I'm going to find a way to connect with new groups of people that are at the level that I believe my partner should be at, and then connect with people who are not necessarily your ideal partner and tell them what you're looking for.
I love that. And I feel like finding the people whose values really align with you as well kind of keys in to that right.
Yeah.
finding that right person, most likely.
I think that that's valuable still because it widens your pool. But again, operationalizing it because you don't have all day to waste on that. So maybe you spend an hour on it a week, right? So if you say, I'm going to do 2 new activities every single week, Saturday's my day to make connections, and getting in that habit and that rhythm and making it manageable because you have big things you're chasing. So of course you can't dedicate all your time to dating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely when you got a lot of things on your plate, you have to time block, make time for what's important. So yeah, and it's so
Exactly.
interesting too. I mean, you would have to do that anyway in a relationship. But I think sometimes there's something to be said for the energy of like planning and creating space for a relationship in your life, and I think it's almost like doing those things actually is opening that space up to be filled later with actual relationship time, so
Couldn't agree
that's
more.
really interesting. Yeah.
And I know that my story can sound a little bit woo woo, if you will, but I think it's a combination of, everything in life is a combination of strategy and serendipity. And this is actually a quote from Akshay's dad that I love. And, he always talks about that it's both. I believe in the spiritual side of things, but I also believe in taking action. And I think it's that combination of, energy responds to action. So having your strategy, but also opening yourself to new possibilities. Because every time you go to one of those events, you have no idea who you're going to meet. You have no idea if it's going to be worth your time. But if you look for value in every time that you do that, and whether that's a friend connection, a romantic connection, whatever it is, it's never wasted time. The same thing about dating. I've heard people say a date was such a waste of time. If you are on a date and this is not necessarily going to be the person, you can still use that date as an opportunity to practice a relationship skill. Maybe you practice active listening. Maybe you practice asking better questions. So in my mind, there's no wasted events. There's no wasted dates. Every one of those can become an opportunity to practice and develop you into a better partner.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all of that. In the South, they say put legs on your prayers.
Yes, simply said.
Yeah, I love that. What have you found to be the biggest challenge as you've kind of navigated, the high performance relationship, I guess, navigated your way through building a high performance relationship? What has been your biggest challenge?
I think my biggest challenge has really been asking for more things that I want because, I can fall into such a strong, I have old tendencies around people pleasing. I know, especially with, we were traveling for 80% of the last year, which is a lot. And it's hard being out of your rhythms and really knowing what I need. And that was something so beautiful that Akshay would reflect back to me, was saying, all right, you've supported me quite a lot. Are you getting all your needs met? Do you need anything else? And so, not judging myself for needing some frivolous things, right? Wanting to get my nails done or getting a massage from time to time. And so making sure for me that I was still asking for things I need, still pouring back into my own cup, because there would be moments, right? So there's nobody who's perfect at that. So it'd be moments of overgiving maybe, and then needing to reset a little bit and do a little bit more for myself. But that's where a really strong partner will see that. And also, I developed a lot of awareness, and I actually think I even created a worksheet around this of what are the signs that I have given too much, that I'm feeling a little bit depleted. And so know now what are some of the indicators, and that means, all right, it's time to go do something frivolous. It's time to go do something that fills me back up. And that's going to be different for every person. So I think the recommendation would be to develop some awareness or really identify what are some of the less wonderful characteristics about yourself, let's say, that start to show up if you are a little bit depleted. So for me, I can tell my internal center is a little bit off. I get frustrated a little bit more easily about silly things if I haven't been pouring into my own cup. Now, it's not something that I externalize, but I notice it within myself and say, all right, this is time for me to take a break, to go do something. And so, yes, a partner can reflect that back to you, but only if you first have awareness around what are some signs that I'm feeling a little bit depleted.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that when I feel that I need to take a break. Let me just go reset and then come back with a fresh mind that makes all the difference. All the difference in the world. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
because
so
our
cool.
partner's not always going to be there to regulate that for us, right? I was lucky kind of early on that happened, that he
Nor should
mentioned.
they be the person
Yeah,
to regulate.
exactly. It's important that you develop that your own awareness around.
Yeah, I love that. How has like emotional regulation for you kind of played a role in developing your own relationship skills? Not necessarily just through this, but over time.
Absolutely. So for me, emotional regulation, I think, is the cornerstone of being a good partner, of being a good business person, right? So you're not going to yell at an employee if you're frustrated, right? So, well, hopefully. But the true community leaders, the people that are growth oriented, have learned that in their professional life. And it's so funny to see how many people don't always apply it in their personal life. You know, they do such a good job all day and then they're feeling a little depleted and then they give their partner the worst of themselves. And I think that that's hard, and that's a hard thing. And bringing that awareness, I think, is so important. So for me, the emotional regulation is making sure that I don't get depleted. So I have all the emotional regulation in the world when I've slept well, when I've taken care of myself, when I'm working out, all of these things. And so I think it really comes down to also creating space between the stimuli, right? Whether that's frustration, sadness, whatever thing that creates that emotion, and what you do with it. So it doesn't mean stuffing down your emotions. If I'm frustrated, it's okay to feel the feeling. In fact, it's important to feel the feeling, but do I act on that? Do I journal? Do I take a moment and breathe? Do I go for a walk? So what do you do when you have that stimuli and that emotion? And so the goal with emotional regulation is not to ignore the feelings, but to resolve the stimuli and not react.
So good. Yeah. What would you say is like, as you've gone through this journey, like you're talking about the emotional regulation, learning, how to do that. There's sometimes an element with people who are community leaders where they have a big following. They have, some level of fame, how do you handle that, and how does that play a role in your relationship and managing that, sort of protecting and holding sacred the things that need to be held sacred in the relationship?
So for us, especially as we're growing our following, sharing more intimately about our relationship, the biggest thing is always asking permission, right? And I think so often too, anything within your relationship, especially points of friction, need to be resolved within your relationship before it's shared externally. I think that can be the biggest mistake that I've seen a lot, especially with people who have a decent following, they're sharing things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with seeking counsel from a professional, right? When you're really going through something. However, the day-to-day stuff, if you are first going to your friends or to your following, sharing something before you've shared it and resolved it with your partner, that's a point of friction. And so for us, we really have not shared things about our relationship before solving it internally. We're both very cognizant too of like, is this okay to share? Is this not? So there's a constant asking of permission, especially as it relates to relationship stories. So as I'm telling different stories of moments of friction or how we overcame certain things, I'm always asking for his permission first and vice versa. So it's fortunate that both of us are very comfortable with being pretty honest and open about our relationship and the progress, the emotions we're experiencing, because we see the value in that, in allowing people to see how we're moving through something might give them some tools to move through it themselves. But, keeping the relationship sacred, I mean, we have a lot of inside jokes. We have a lot of things that we don't share externally. Like, we're constantly laughing. We're super playful. For example, I made him a comic, actually, that he gets to look a new page at every 10 days that he's on this expedition for 115 days. And we could never share it publicly. It's all of our inside jokes. It makes us both laugh hysterically. So we keep those private, funny moments private. And that is a way to also keep that sacred, is, we have certain things we just will not share. And those are the cute, funny things that are just for us. But for the most part, we are both very comfortable with sharing a lot about our relationship, but that also comes with a high level of trust in each other. And really knowing that we have this both core shared value of integrity. So, if something ever comes up or if we're unsure, we're going to share with the other person right away. Even when he proposed to me, actually, he immediately said, after he proposed, he said, "All right, I now need to tell you there's two things I lied to you about. And I've never lied to you outside of these, so I have to tell you right now. First, when I was on the phone call with whoever he said the name was, I was actually asking your dad for his permission to marry you. Second, when I said I was going tire dragging the other day, I wasn't. I was picking up your ring." And so, we both laughed, but we both have those moments of, we have everything on the table at all times. And that's what keeps that trust and that sacredness, is that consistent honesty within our relationship.
Yeah. Well, I love that. So what's next for you?
For me, it's a lot about being able to to now get these tools, frameworks that I've been mentioning into the hands of people who want and need them. I'm building out a lot of these materials and trainings to make it more readily available for others, because my personal mission really is to share the things that we've unlocked in our relationship. I want everyone to experience the level of safety, fun, joy, laughter, love that I get to every day. Even to this day, with all the stress that we've endured with travel, fundraising, his training, running businesses, I can say that my relationship is the most peaceful part of my life. And that's really made possible through the things that we've uncovered. And so for me, it's just sharing. It's sharing the journey, sharing things we're working on. As I mentioned, I'm working on a book currently. So once that is available, I'll definitely let you know. But really being able to share with others, because I think we all can have the same level of peace in our relationship. And it really does serve us as high performers to have that stability, to have that place to come home to every day, and that source of love and inspiration.
Yeah, I love that. When you said that, just like it's the most peaceful place in my life, that just really hit me. It's definitely something to use in your own marketing if you
Thank you.
So where can people find out more about you?
So for finding out more about me, you can find me on Instagram at Melissa Nanavati, Nanavati. It's a lot of A's, as well as melissananavati.com. So those are really the two core places to find me, to connect with me. I'm always happy to answer questions, to help people navigate the different challenges of relationships. Anything that I can do to help and serve, that is ultimately my goal. So never hesitate to send me a DM, send me an email, whatever that may be, and I'd love to help and support.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Any final advice for our community leaders who are looking for a high-powered relationship?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give is now is not forever. So there are going to be seasons, not only in your business, but in your relationship, in your dating process. So really leaning into what actions do I need to take during this season to be successful at either finding a partner or repairing the foundation if you've been stuck in a cycle of conflict, or to support my partner while they chase something really big. And just really recognizing that everything is a season.
Awesome. I love that. And it's been so great having you on the show today, and a lot of amazing knowledge drops. And I know that things are definitely, wilding out for you with Akshay halfway around the world. And so it's so cool to see, how you've responded to that and what you guys have created together. And I'm absolutely fascinated by you and what you're doing, and I look forward to that continuing and you sharing more of that. So thank you again for being on here, and I know all of our listeners will love this. So let's get out there and continue to empower all the luminaries of the world. And
it's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and really, really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. That's the show.